I stand in my Manhattan penthouse, marble floors gleaming beneath my feet, holding a certified letter that arrived this morning. The return address makes my stomach clench. Hardy Family, Denver, Colorado. My estranged family begging me to come home for Christmas. I laugh, but there's no humor in the sound that echoes through my luxury apartment. 3 years ago, these same people destroyed my full scholarship to Stanford by fabricating evidence that got me expelled for academic dishonesty. My parents, Janet and Robert, chose their golden child Tyler over me, watching silently as my dreams crumbled into dust. Now Tyler has bankrupted their precious family business and vanished like smoke, leaving them desperate and broken. The letter trembles in my hands as I read their pathetic pleas, but what catches my attention isn't their apology. It's the medical letterhead attached, revealing my father is dying and they're scrambling for salvation. They want their successful daughter back now that their favorite son has failed them, but I have other plans entirely. Growing up in suburban Denver, I was everything parents claim they want in a child. Straight A student from kindergarten through senior year, never missing honor roll, never disappointing anyone academically. I captained the debate team, volunteered every weekend at the local animal shelter, and tutored struggling classmates for free. While other teenagers partied or dated, I studied relentlessly, driven by dreams of computer science greatness. My parents, Janet and Robert, always compared me unfavorably to Tyler, my brother, who was 2 years younger, but their obvious favorite from the moment he could walk. When Tyler brought home C grades, they celebrated his improvement. When I earned perfect scores, they reminded me that grades weren't everything. Tyler received praise for mediocre soccer performance while my academic achievements gathered dust on forgotten shelves. The inequality became impossible to ignore during high school. While I worked 3 part-time jobs to save money for college applications and textbooks, Tyler received a brand new BMW for his 16th birthday. The gleaming silver car sat in our driveway like a monument to favoritism. I rode the bus to school watching my brother speed past in his luxury vehicle, music blasting and friends laughing in the passenger seats. Despite the constant dismissal, I persevered. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, believed in my potential when my own family didn't. She helped me apply for scholarships, writing recommendation letters that highlighted my dedication and intellectual curiosity. When the acceptance letter arrived from Stanford with a full academic scholarship for computer science, I felt vindicated. Finally, proof that my sacrifices mattered. The celebration dinner was awkward. My parents smiled politely, but seemed uncomfortable with my success. Tyler sulked through the entire meal, picking at his food while I described my plans for studying artificial intelligence and machine learning. My father, Robert, kept checking his phone, distracted by business calls about the family hardware store. The night before leaving for California, I couldn't sleep from excitement and anxiety. Walking downstairs for water, I heard my parents talking quietly in the kitchen. Their words stopped me cold in the hallway shadows. I wish Tyler had been the one to get that scholarship instead, my mother whispered. Stanford would be perfect for him. Karina's too serious, too focused on herself. Tyler needs the opportunities more than she does. My father agreed, his voice heavy with disappointment. She'll be fine wherever she goes. Tyler's the one who really needs our support. Maybe this distance will be good for everyone. Standing there in my pajamas, clutching my Stanford acceptance letter, I realized my greatest achievement meant nothing to the people whose approval I'd spent 18 years seeking. The scholarship that represented my future felt worthless in my trembling hands. Stanford University exceeded every expectation I'd harbored during those long high school nights, dreaming of intellectual freedom. The campus buzzed with brilliant minds from around the world, professors who treated students as colleagues rather than subordinates, and resources that made anything seem possible. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued academic excellence and innovative thinking. My computer science courses challenged me in ways I'd never experienced. Professor Williams introduced concepts that kept me awake at night, not from stress, but from pure excitement about algorithmic possibilities. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while developing a revolutionary mobile application for sustainable food distribution that connected restaurants with surplus meals to local food banks and homeless shelters. This app gained attention from Silicon Valley investors who saw potential in my approach to solving real-world problems through technology. My professors praised the innovative algorithms I designed for optimizing delivery routes and minimizing food waste. The validation felt intoxicating after years of being overlooked at home. During my sophomore year, I landed a coveted internship at Tech Forward, a startup focused on environmental sustainability through artificial intelligence. The office atmosphere crackled with creative energy, brilliant engineers collaborating on projects that could change the world. My supervisor, Dr. Martinez, assigned me meaningful work rather than typical intern busy tasks. I called home every Sunday evening, sharing my achievements with parents who seemed increasingly distracted. My enthusiastic descriptions of machine learning breakthroughs and startup culture received polite but disengaged responses. They were always rushing off the phone to deal with Tyler's latest crisis. My brother was struggling at Front Range Community College, barely maintaining the minimum GPA required to avoid academic probation. His friends introduced him to underground poker games, where college students gambled away financial aid money and part-time job earnings. Tyler's losses mounted quickly, and he began asking our parents for increasingly large emergency loans. My parents drained their savings from the family hardware store to cover Tyler's gambling debts and academic failures. Robert complained about business difficulties, blaming online retailers and big box stores for stealing customers from small family businesses. Janet worked extra shifts at the store handling inventory and customer service, while Robert managed suppliers and contractors. During Christmas break of my sophomore year, I noticed the strain on my family's finances. The house needed repairs they couldn't afford. Their cars showed signs of mechanical neglect, and grocery shopping involved careful coupon clipping and brand comparisons. Meanwhile, Tyler continued requesting money for textbooks he never bought and classes he rarely attended. I offered to help financially, suggesting I could work additional hours during summer break to contribute to family expenses. My parents declined, insisting they could handle everything themselves. They seemed embarrassed by my success, as if my achievements highlighted their struggles with Tyler's failures. Returning to Stanford for spring semester, I threw myself deeper into my studies and internship work. My sustainable food distribution app won the university's annual technology innovation competition, earning a $10,000 prize and meetings with venture capital firms. The recognition felt like validation of every sacrifice I'd made to reach this point. But late at night in my dormitory, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong at home. Phone calls became shorter and more strained. My parents asked fewer questions about my studies and more about when I might visit Denver again. Tyler stopped talking to me, entirely claiming he was too busy with school and work to maintain regular contact. During spring finals week, I discovered emails in my Stanford account that I hadn't sent. Someone had accessed my academic portal using my login credentials. The security breach confused and alarmed me, but university IT assured me they reset my passwords and secured my accounts. I assumed it was a random hacking attempt and focused on completing my exceptional academic year. I had no idea my own brother was stealing my work, copying my algorithms and research papers to submit as his own at community college. The theft was methodical and calculated, Tyler taking credit for my innovations while I remained completely unaware of his betrayal. My family's financial problems were about to become the least of my concerns. Finals week of my junior year should have been a triumph. My thesis project on machine learning applications for environmental sustainability was generating serious interest from graduate school admissions committees and technology companies. Professor Williams had recommended my work to colleagues at Google and Apple, suggesting I might skip traditional graduate school entirely for industry research positions. I was reviewing final calculations in the library when my phone buzzed with an urgent message from the dean's office. The secretary requested my immediate presence for a meeting regarding my academic standing. Confusion clouded my thoughts as I gathered my materials and walked across campus to the administration building. Dean Richardson sat behind an imposing oak desk, his expression grave and disappointing. Two other administrators flanked him, their faces equally serious. The atmosphere felt like a tribunal rather than an academic meeting. My stomach dropped as I recognized the formal setup of a disciplinary proceeding. Miss Hardy, we need to discuss serious allegations regarding your thesis project. Dean Richardson began, his voice measured and cold. Evidence has come to our attention suggesting academic dishonesty in your machine learning research. The words hit me like physical blows. Academic dishonesty was the most serious charge a university could level against a student capable of destroying careers before they began. I struggled to process what he was saying, my perfect academic record flashing before my eyes. I don't understand. I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. My research is completely original. I developed every algorithm myself, spent months testing and refining the code. Dean Richardson slid a folder across his desk toward me. Inside was a printed research paper titled Environmental Applications of Machine Learning Algorithms, authored by someone named T. Johnson and submitted to an obscure academic database 2 years earlier. The content was identical to my thesis work down to specific variable names and comment structures in the programming code. My hands shook as I examined the document. Every innovation I developed, every breakthrough I'd achieved appeared in this earlier paper. The timestamps showed it had been submitted during my freshman year, long before I'd begun working on environmental sustainability applications. The evidence seemed damning and irrefutable. This has to be a mistake, I insisted, my voice rising with panic and desperation. Someone stole my work and backdated it. This is impossible. The administrators exchanged skeptical glances. Professor Williams, my thesis advisor, entered the room looking deeply disappointed. His presence felt like another betrayal, this man who'd praised my innovative thinking now viewing me as a common plagiarist. Karina, the digital fingerprints match your coding style exactly, Professor Williams said sadly. The algorithms use techniques you demonstrated in my advanced course. How do you explain the remarkable similarity? I couldn't explain it because I couldn't understand it myself. The person named T. Johnson was completely unknown to me, yet they'd somehow produced work identical to research I developed independently. The timing made my claims of originality appear absurd. University policy regarding plagiarism was strict and unforgiving. Students found guilty of academic dishonesty faced immediate suspension or expulsion regardless of their previous academic standing. My perfect GPA and spotless record offered no protection against such serious allegations. We're beginning a formal investigation, Dean Richardson announced. Until this matter is resolved, you're suspended from all academic activities. Your thesis defense is postponed indefinitely, and your graduation status is under review. Walking back to my dormitory felt surreal, like moving through a nightmare that refused to end. Fellow students passed me in the hallways, unaware that my entire academic career was crumbling. The future I'd worked so hard to build was evaporating based on evidence I couldn't explain or defend against. That evening, I called my parents seeking support and understanding. Their response was strange and uncomfortable, asking detailed questions about the accusations rather than offering immediate comfort. Tyler wasn't available to talk, supposedly busy with his own finals and too stressed to deal with family drama. The formal investigation began immediately, university officials examining every aspect of my academic work. They analyzed my computer files, interviewed my professors, and scrutinized my research methodology. Meanwhile, I sat in my dormitory room watching my dreams dissolve while trying to understand how my original work could have appeared under someone else's name years before I'd created it. The mystery deepened when I discovered that T. Johnson had submitted the paper using an email address and mailing address that traced back to Denver, Colorado. The coincidence seemed too strange to ignore, but I couldn't imagine who would have access to my work or motivation to frame me for plagiarism. As the investigation continued, I realized the anonymous thief hadn't just stolen my research. They'd carefully constructed a trap designed to destroy my academic career at the moment of my greatest success. Someone wanted me to fail, and they'd planned my downfall with meticulous precision. Desperation drove me to spend my internship savings on a private digital forensics expert. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in academic fraud cases, helping students prove their innocence when university investigations fell short. Her office in downtown Palo Alto was filled with computer servers and monitoring equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. Most plagiarism cases involve lazy students copying from easily available sources, Dr. Chen explained as she analyzed my files. Your situation is different. Someone invested significant time and effort to frame you specifically. Her investigation began with the mysterious T. Johnson paper submitted 2 years earlier. The email account used for submission had been created specifically for that purpose and never used again. The IP address traced back to a residential internet connection in suburban Denver, which made my stomach clench with horrible suspicion. The address matches your family's home, Dr. Chen said gently, watching my face for reaction. Someone in your household submitted that paper using your brother's personal information but designed to incriminate you. Phone records revealed dozens of calls between Tyler's cell phone and our parents' home during the weeks leading up to my accusation. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. My family had been coordinating something while I remained completely unaware of their plotting. But the most devastating evidence came from Tyler's computer, which Dr. Chen accessed through security vulnerabilities in his social media accounts. Hidden in a folder labeled insurance, she found voice recordings that Tyler had secretly made of conversations with our parents. The first recording made me physically nauseous. Tyler's voice, whining and manipulative, convinced our parents that my success was destroying his self-confidence and future opportunities. Everyone compares me to Karina, he complained. Teachers, friends, even strangers who here were siblings. I'll never be good enough as long as she's perfect at everything. My mother's voice was soft but determined. What do you need us to do? Help me level the playing field, Tyler replied. She doesn't deserve those opportunities any more than I do. If something happened to her perfect record, maybe people would see that I'm just as capable as she is. The second recording was even worse. My father's voice, usually so principled when lecturing me about honesty and integrity, discussing the details of framing me for academic dishonesty. We have access to all her work when she visits home, Robert reasoned. Tyler can submit it under a fake name backdate and then report the plagiarism later. What if she proves her innocence? Janet asked nervously. Universities don't reverse these decisions, Tyler said confidently. Once she's accused, the reputation damage is permanent. Her scholarship will be revoked, and she'll have to come home where we can control her future. The third recording contained my parents explicitly agreeing to destroy my academic career. They discussed my arrogance and selfishness, claiming I'd abandoned my family for personal ambition. They convinced themselves that destroying my dreams was justified because Tyler needed the opportunities more. Dr. Chen documented everything meticulously, creating a comprehensive report that proved my innocence and identified the real criminals. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. My own family had orchestrated my downfall with calculated precision. This is enough to clear your name and pursue criminal charges, Dr. Chen said. Academic fraud is a federal crime when it involves scholarships and financial aid. I sat in her office staring at the evidence of my family's betrayal, feeling like I was drowning in their hatred. The people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally had actively worked to destroy my future. They'd chosen Tyler's mediocrity over my excellence, sacrificing my dreams to soothe his wounded ego. Calling my parents that evening was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I confronted them with the recordings, demanding explanations for their inexplicable cruelty. Their responses were defensive and unrepentant. "You were getting too big for your britches," my father said coldly. "Success was making you arrogant and selfish. You forgot where you came from." My mother was more emotional, but equally unapologetic. "Tyler needed our help more than you did. You would have been successful anywhere. We had to choose, and we chose our son who was struggling." "I'm your daughter too," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You stopped being our daughter when you chose Stanford over family," Janet replied. "Tyler needed us, and you only needed your own ambition." Tyler refused to talk to me at all, blocking my phone number and social media accounts. He'd gotten what he wanted: my destruction and his parents' undivided support. The fact that his actions were criminal and morally bankrupt didn't matter to any of them. The recordings provided clear evidence that my family had deliberately sabotaged my education and future. They'd stolen my work, fabricated evidence against me, and felt completely justified in their betrayal. The depth of their hatred shocked me more than their actions themselves. Armed with Dr. Chen's report, I returned to Stanford, hoping to clear my name and resume my education. But institutional bureaucracy proved more powerful than truth and evidence. Despite Dr. Chen's comprehensive forensic report proving my innocence, Stanford's administration remained unmoved by the evidence of my family's betrayal. Dean Richardson reviewed the documentation with what appeared to be genuine concern, but his final decision crushed any remaining hope I harbored for justice. "While your evidence is compelling, Ms. Hardy, we cannot reverse our decision due to institutional policy and potential legal ramifications," he explained during our final meeting. "The university must protect itself from liability in cases involving academic dishonesty accusations." The legal department had advised against admitting they'd made an error regardless of new evidence. Reversing my expulsion would imply negligence in their original investigation, potentially exposing Stanford to lawsuits from other students who'd faced similar accusations. My individual suffering was deemed less important than protecting the institution's reputation. My scholarship was permanently revoked, and the expulsion remained on my academic record. Every future university application would require explaining why Stanford had dismissed me for plagiarism. The scarlet letter of academic dishonesty would follow me for the rest of my educational career. Professor Williams met with me privately, expressing personal regret about the situation while maintaining he couldn't publicly support my reinstatement. "I believe your evidence, Corina, but I can't risk my own position by challenging university policy," he admitted sadly. "I'm truly sorry this happened to you." My internship at Tech Forward was immediately terminated when news of the plagiarism accusations reached my supervisor. Dr. Martinez was sympathetic, but explained that the company couldn't employ someone under investigation for academic fraud. "Our reputation depends on the integrity of our research team," she said apologetically. The scandal followed me like a toxic cloud as I attempted to transfer to other universities. Admissions committees saw the Stanford expulsion and immediately rejected my applications without considering the circumstances. My perfect academic record meant nothing compared to the plagiarism allegation. Returning to Denver felt like a death march. I had no choice but to move back into my childhood bedroom, surrounded by participation trophies and high school honor roll certificates that now seemed mockingly irrelevant. My parents had gotten exactly what they wanted. Their successful daughter brought low and dependent on family support. But even that small mercy was denied to me. The night I arrived home, my parents informed me that I couldn't stay in their house indefinitely. "You brought shame to this family," my mother declared. "Tyler's friends and our neighbors know about Stanford. We can't have people thinking we support academic dishonesty. My father was even more brutal in his dismissal. You made your choices and now you have to live with the consequences. We're not responsible for fixing your mistakes. Tyler had moved back home permanently after failing out of community college, taking over my former bedroom and treating my return as a personal victory. He smirked whenever our paths crossed, clearly enjoying my downfall. The BMW I'd envied in high school still sat in the driveway, now waxed and detailed to perfection, while I had no transportation. Within 2 weeks, I was living in my beaten-down Honda Civic, sleeping in the back seat, and showering at a 24-hour gym membership I could barely afford. The car became my entire world bedroom, office, dining room, and sanctuary. Winter in Denver made the arrangement nearly unbearable, but I had no alternatives. My job search was a series of humiliating rejections. Employers who might have overlooked a college dropout couldn't ignore someone expelled for academic dishonesty. The story followed me to every interview, poisoning potential opportunities before they could develop. I was radioactive in the professional world. Eventually, I found work at 3 different establishments that hired people without performing extensive background checks. Morning shifts at Sunrise Diner involved serving coffee and pancakes to construction workers and early commuters. Afternoon hours at Megamart grocery store meant stocking shelves and dealing with angry customers. Night security at an office complex paid the best, but left me exhausted and isolated. Every dollar earned went toward basic survival gas for the car gym membership, for showers, fast food meals, and basic clothing from thrift stores. There was no money for entertainment, socializing, or planning for a better future. Each day blended into the next in a gray haze of minimum wage labor and profound exhaustion. Meanwhile, Tyler's social media posts showed him living his best life at Colorado State University, where our parents had managed to secure his admission despite his community college failures. They'd written glowing letters of recommendation based on my stolen achievements, describing Tyler as an innovative student with exceptional potential in computer science. Family gatherings that I was excluded from appeared regularly in Tyler's Instagram stories. Holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, and weekend barbecues proceeded without any mention of their disowned daughter living in a car 20 minutes away. I had become a non-person in their narrative, erased from family history, as completely as if I'd never existed. The isolation was crushing. Former Stanford classmates avoided my calls and messages, presumably embarrassed to associate with someone accused of plagiarism. High school friends had moved on with their lives, attending different universities or starting careers in other cities. My social circle had completely evaporated. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket, making even basic tasks feel overwhelming. Some mornings, I couldn't summon the energy to get out of the car for work, calling in sick and losing precious income I couldn't afford to sacrifice. The future that had once seemed so bright and promising now appeared completely hopeless. But late at night, during my security guard shifts, walking empty hallways in the office building, I began to notice something interesting about their outdated computer systems. The company was running software that hadn't been updated in years, leaving them vulnerable to cyber attacks that were becoming increasingly common. My computer science training, though incomplete, was more advanced than anything their IT department possessed. During slow nights, I started teaching myself advanced cybersecurity techniques using the office computers and free online resources. The intellectual challenge felt like coming alive again after months of numbing manual labor. My brain, which had been dormant during endless hours of diner work and grocery stocking, began firing on all cylinders again. Tyler's acceptance to Colorado State University using my stolen work would prove to be the beginning of his own downfall, though none of us realized it yet. Living in a studio apartment in the worst neighborhood of Denver felt like inhabiting a different planet from my former Stanford dormitory. The building reeked of cigarette smoke and cooking grease with paper-thin walls that transmitted every argument and crying baby throughout the complex. My monthly rent consumed most of my income, leaving barely enough for food and basic utilities. The apartment came furnished with a sagging mattress, a card table that served as both desk and dining room, and a single folding chair that had seen better decades. The kitchenette consisted of a hot plate and mini refrigerator that buzzed constantly like an angry insect. The bathroom had no ventilation, so humidity and mold were permanent residents. My 3 jobs barely provided enough income to survive. At Sunrise Diner, I served endless cups of coffee to truckers and construction workers who left 50-cent tips on $10 checks. The work was physically demanding and emotionally draining, dealing with impatient customers who treated servers like servants rather than human beings. Mega Mart grocery store was a fluorescent-lit nightmare of corporate efficiency and customer complaints. I spent hours stocking shelves with products I couldn't afford to buy, watching families purchase groceries that would feed them for weeks, while I survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. The manager, a bitter man named Dave who enjoyed wielding his minimal authority, criticized my work constantly and threatened termination over minor infractions. Night security at Westfield Office Complex offered the best hourly wage, but left me isolated and exhausted. Walking empty corridors from midnight until 8 in the morning, checking doors and monitoring basic security systems gave me too much time to think about how dramatically my life had collapsed. The work was mind-numbing but necessary for survival. My social media feeds became torture devices, showing former Stanford classmates landing prestigious internships, publishing research papers, and celebrating graduations I should have shared with them. Their success felt like salt in wounds that refused to heal. I eventually deleted all my accounts rather than endure the constant reminders of my stolen future. Tyler's Instagram posts were particularly painful to witness. He was thriving at Colorado State University, joining the Computer Science Honor Society, and earning recognition for academic achievements built on my stolen work. Our parents beamed with pride in family photos taken at campus, events supporting the son who destroyed his sister's dreams to advance his own. The cognitive dissonance of their behavior was staggering. They'd raised me to value honesty, integrity, and hard work, then rewarded Tyler for lying, cheating, and betraying his own family. Their moral compass had been broken by favoritism and Tyler's manipulative charm. Depression became my constant companion, a gray fog that made every simple task feel monumentally difficult. Getting out of bed required tremendous effort. Showering felt pointless when I'd only return to the same miserable existence. Eating became mechanical rather than enjoyable fuel for a body I no longer cared about maintaining. Some nights I sat in my car outside my family's house watching through lit windows as they enjoyed dinner together. They looked happy and content, their lives improved by my absence. Tyler had the attention and support he'd always craved, while our parents convinced themselves they'd made the right choice, sacrificing one child for another. The isolation was crushing. I had no friends, no romantic prospects, no hobbies or interests beyond basic survival. My Stanford education felt like a dream I'd imagined rather than something I'd actually experienced. The brilliant, ambitious young woman I'd been seemed like a fictional character from someone else's story. Financial stress consumed my daily existence. Every expense required careful consideration. Could I afford groceries this week, or did I need to prioritize rent? Should I buy medication for a persistent cough or save the money for gas to get to work? The constant calculations were exhausting and demoralizing. But during those long night shifts at the office building, something unexpected began to happen. The company's computer systems fascinated me with their obvious vulnerabilities and outdated security protocols. My incomplete Stanford education had provided enough foundation to recognize glaring problems that their IT department seemed oblivious to addressing. I started researching cybersecurity during my breaks using free internet access to learn about emerging threats and protection strategies. The intellectual challenge awakened something in my brain that had been dormant since my expulsion. For the first time in months, I felt mentally engaged and curious about something beyond mere survival. The building's security cameras were connected to an ancient network that any competent hacker could penetrate within minutes. Their employee database contained sensitive personal information protected by passwords that a child could guess. Financial records were stored on servers that hadn't been updated since the previous decade. Gradually, I began teaching myself advanced cybersecurity techniques using online courses and tutorials. The work was challenging and required intense concentration qualities I'd thought depression had permanently destroyed. But late at night, alone in those empty hallways, I discovered that my intellectual abilities hadn't disappeared. They'd simply been buried under trauma and despair. My family had stolen my education and destroyed my dreams, but they couldn't erase the knowledge I'd already gained or prevent me from learning new skills independently. As I delved deeper into cybersecurity research, I began to see possibilities for a future I'd thought was permanently lost. The company's computer vulnerabilities represented more than academic interest. They were practice problems for skills that could potentially rebuild my career from the ashes of my family's betrayal. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by mastering this new field. Tyler's success at Colorado State University was about to encounter some unexpected obstacles as his academic dishonesty finally caught up with him, but I remained focused on my own resurrection through cybersecurity expertise. During my third month working night security at Westfield Office Complex, I discovered something that would change everything. The building housed 15 different companies from accounting firms to marketing agencies, all connected through a shared network infrastructure that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. Their collective cybersecurity was a disaster waiting to happen. I'd been teaching myself advanced programming languages during quiet hours, using free resources and library books to fill gaps in my incomplete Stanford education. Python, JavaScript, and SQL became my new companions during those lonely midnight shifts. The intellectual stimulation felt like returning to life after months of emotional numbness. One Tuesday evening, I noticed unusual activity on the network monitors. Someone was attempting to breach the system using relatively sophisticated malware designed to steal financial information from the accounting firms. The attack was subtle enough to avoid triggering basic security alarms, but my growing cybersecurity knowledge helped me recognize the intrusion patterns. The building's IT support consisted of a part-time contractor who visited twice monthly to address basic computer problems. He had no expertise in cybersecurity and wouldn't return my calls about the ongoing attack. The companies were completely vulnerable, their client data and financial records exposed to criminal exploitation. I spent the entire night analyzing the attack methodology and developing a response strategy. Using skills I'd learned through online courses and late-night research sessions, I created a comprehensive security protocol that would not only stop the current breach, but prevent similar future attacks. The work was challenging and exhilarating, reminding me why I'd fallen in love with computer science. By dawn, I'd successfully neutralized the cyber attack and documented everything in a detailed report. The malware had been attempting to access payroll information and client financial data from 3 different companies in the building. Without intervention, the criminals would have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars and destroyed multiple small businesses. My report identified specific vulnerabilities in the network infrastructure and provided step-by-step instructions for implementing improved security measures. I included cost estimates for necessary hardware upgrades and software installations, creating a comprehensive cybersecurity overhaul plan that any competent IT professional could execute. The building manager, a stressed middle-aged woman named Patricia, was initially skeptical when I explained the situation during her morning arrival. But as I demonstrated the evidence of attempted theft and showed her how I'd prevented the breach, her attitude shifted from doubt to amazement. "You did this overnight?" she asked, scrolling through my detailed analysis. "Our IT contractor said the system was fine when he checked it last month." I explained that cyber attacks were constantly evolving, requiring active monitoring and regular updates to maintain effective protection. The building's current security was like trying to protect a bank vault with locks from the 19th century. Patricia immediately contacted the tenant companies to inform them about the attempted breach and my successful intervention. Their responses ranged from grateful relief to angry demands about why their sensitive data was so poorly protected. Several companies threatened to break their leases unless cybersecurity improvements were implemented immediately. Within days, Patricia offered me a consulting contract to overhaul the building's entire network security system. The pay was more than my 3 minimum wage jobs combined, but I negotiated carefully to maintain my anonymity. I wasn't ready for professional recognition that might resurface my Stanford scandal. Working under the pseudonym Ghost Coder, I designed and implemented a state-of-the-art cybersecurity infrastructure that exceeded anything the building's companies could have afforded individually. The project required weeks of intensive programming and system analysis work that challenged every skill I developed at Stanford and through independent study. Word of the Ghost Coder's success spread through Denver's business community via referrals from grateful Westfield tenants. My anonymous reputation grew as other companies experienced cyber attacks and sought help from the mysterious expert who'd saved multiple businesses from financial ruin. I established secure communication protocols that allowed potential clients to contact the Ghost Coder without revealing my true identity. Email accounts routed through proxy servers, encrypted messaging systems, and digital payment methods that couldn't be traced back to Karina Hardy living in a studio apartment and working 3 jobs. My first major external contract came from a medical practice whose patient records had been compromised by ransomware. The criminals were demanding $50,000 to restore access to critical health information. I neutralized the attack within hours and recovered all encrypted data without paying any ransom. The medical practice owner was so impressed that he recommended the Ghost Coder to colleagues throughout Colorado's healthcare industry. Medical practices were particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks due to valuable patient information and limited IT budgets for security upgrades. Each successful project built my reputation and technical expertise. I was solving cybersecurity problems that stumped established firms with teams of professional engineers. My Stanford education, though incomplete, provided the theoretical foundation that independent study and practical experience transformed into exceptional capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's betrayal had led to discovering talents I might never have developed otherwise. Their attempt to destroy my future was inadvertently creating opportunities for success they couldn't have imagined. But I remained careful to maintain complete anonymity. The Ghost Coder existed only in digital spaces, communicating through encrypted channels and receiving payments via cryptocurrency transactions that couldn't be traced to my real identity. My Stanford scandal couldn't destroy what didn't officially exist. Late at night in my studio apartment working on cybersecurity projects that challenged and fulfilled me intellectually, I began to glimpse possibilities for a future beyond mere survival. The Ghost Coder's reputation was growing, and with it my confidence in abilities that transcended my family's cruel limitations. Tyler's stolen success at Colorado State University was about to face its own cybersecurity challenges as his academic dishonesty created vulnerabilities he couldn't protect against. 6 months after my first successful cybersecurity intervention, the Ghost Coder had become a legendary figure in Colorado's business community. My reputation for solving impossible digital security problems spread through word-of-mouth referrals that created a waiting list of desperate companies seeking my anonymous expertise. I developed multiple online personas to handle different aspects of my growing consulting business. Alexandra Chen specialized in financial sector cybersecurity, while Morgan Stevens focused on healthcare data protection. Riley Thompson handled government contract work that required security clearances I'd somehow managed to obtain through careful documentation and flawless project delivery. My studio apartment was transformed into a high-tech command center filled with multiple computer monitors, specialized hardware, and communication equipment that would make intelligence agencies envious. Neighbors assumed I worked in graphic design or video editing, which explained the constant delivery of electronic equipment without raising suspicious questions. The technical challenges grew more complex as my client base expanded beyond Colorado. A Los Angeles entertainment company needed protection from hackers attempting to steal unreleased movie scripts. A Texas oil firm required secure communication systems for sensitive exploration data. A pharmaceutical research company in Boston faced industrial espionage threats from international competitors. Each project pushed my skills to new levels and provided increasingly substantial financial compensation. The ghost coder commanded premium rates that reflected the unique value of my services. Companies paid willingly because my interventions saved them millions in potential losses from cyber attacks and data breaches. I lived frugally, despite my growing income, investing most earnings in cryptocurrency portfolios and stock market accounts managed through shell corporations that protected my anonymity. My lifestyle remained unchanged. The same studio apartment, the same thrift store clothing, the same ramen. Noodle dinners. Building wealth was more important than displaying it. My greatest professional triumph came when the Department of Homeland Security contacted the ghost coder about a national security threat. Foreign hackers had penetrated several federal agencies' computer networks, stealing classified information and planting malware designed to disrupt critical infrastructure systems. The government's cybersecurity experts had been working for months without successfully neutralizing the threat. Their frustration led them to seek help from private sector specialists with proven track records of solving impossible problems. My reputation had reached levels that attracted attention from the highest levels of federal law enforcement. The project required obtaining temporary security clearances and working within strict government protocols, but the technical challenge was irresistible. I spent 3 weeks analyzing the intrusion patterns and developing countermeasures that not only eliminated the existing threats, but created defensive systems to prevent future attacks. My success earned a classified commendation from federal cybersecurity officials and led to additional government contracts worth millions of dollars. The ghost coder became a trusted resource for protecting America's most sensitive computer systems from foreign espionage and domestic terrorism threats. But the most personally satisfying aspect of my growing empire was its complete independence from traditional credentialing systems. My Stanford expulsion was irrelevant in the cybersecurity world where results mattered more than academic credentials. Companies and government agencies cared about my ability to solve problems, not whether I had a college degree. Through careful networking and strategic partnerships, I began acquiring small technology companies that complemented my cybersecurity expertise. A data recovery firm in Phoenix, a network infrastructure company in Atlanta, a software development startup in Seattle. Each acquisition expanded my capabilities and market reach while maintaining the anonymity that protected my growing empire. My financial portfolio grew exponentially as cryptocurrency investments and stock market gains amplified my consulting income. Within 2 years of living in my car, I was worth over $10 million and controlled a technology network that spanned the entire United States. The transformation felt surreal and almost impossible to believe. During this period of rapid professional growth, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Occasional social media monitoring revealed that Tyler was struggling academically at Colorado State University, despite the stolen advantages my parents had provided him. His grades were declining, and he'd developed a serious gambling addiction that was consuming his financial aid money. My parents' hardware store was experiencing financial difficulties as Tyler's college expenses and gambling debts continued draining their resources. They'd mortgaged their house to cover his latest crisis, but their sacrifices weren't producing the academic success they'd expected when they destroyed my Stanford opportunities. The cosmic justice of their situation provided some emotional satisfaction, but I remained focused on building my own success rather than monitoring their decline. My energy was better invested in expanding the ghost coder empire than dwelling on past betrayals that couldn't be changed. One particular government contract led to an unexpected discovery that would soon become relevant to my family situation. While investigating financial fraud networks, I uncovered evidence that a major embezzlement scheme was targeting small businesses across the Mountain West region. The criminals were specifically exploiting outdated computer systems at family-owned retailers and service companies. My analysis revealed that several Colorado hardware stores were among the targeted businesses, including one in suburban Denver that seemed familiar. When I cross-referenced the business registration information, my stomach dropped as I realized the connection. Hardy Family Hardware was one of dozens of small businesses being systematically robbed by sophisticated cybercriminals who specialized in draining accounts and destroying financial records to cover their tracks. My parents were about to lose everything they'd worked decades to build, and they had no idea their destruction was approaching. The irony was devastating and poetic. My family had destroyed my future to protect their golden child, but Tyler's failures were bankrupting them while cyber criminals prepared to steal whatever remained of their life savings. They needed exactly the type of expertise they'd prevented me from developing at Stanford. But I wasn't ready to reveal myself or offer assistance. My empire was still growing, and my anonymity remained crucial for protecting everything I'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. They'd made their choice 3 years ago, and now they would live with the consequences just as I'd been forced to do. Tyler's academic dishonesty was about to create additional problems that would compound their existing financial crisis, though none of us realized how dramatically their situation would deteriorate in the coming months. Through my extensive cybersecurity network, I learned about Tyler's academic troubles before my parents did. A contact at Colorado State University's IT department had noticed suspicious activity in their academic integrity database, with multiple reports of plagiarism and cheating allegations involving computer science students. Tyler's name appeared in several incident reports related to selling test answers and assignment solutions to struggling classmates. He'd created an underground academic fraud network charging desperate students hundreds of dollars for stolen exams and completed programming projects. The scheme was sophisticated but ultimately doomed by his characteristic greed and carelessness. University investigators discovered that Tyler had been copying work from advanced online courses and submitting it as original assignments. His computer programming projects were far too sophisticated for his actual skill level, containing algorithms and techniques that wouldn't be taught until graduate-level courses. The disparity between his submitted work and his classroom performance was impossible to ignore. But the most damning evidence came when investigators found my original Stanford research papers on Tyler's personal laptop. He'd kept copies of everything he'd stolen from me, apparently planning to continue using my work throughout his academic career. The timestamps proved he'd possessed the material for years, long before beginning his computer science studies. The investigation revealed that Tyler had submitted multiple assignments using my stolen algorithms and research methodologies. His academic success at Colorado State was entirely built on work I developed at Stanford, making his entire college career a massive fraud. Every grade, every honor, every achievement was based on my intellectual property. When confronted with the evidence, Tyler's response was predictably narcissistic and blame-shifting. He claimed I'd given him permission to use my work, then argued that sharing research between siblings was normal family cooperation. When those excuses failed, he accused me of abandoning the family and owing him compensation for emotional damages. University officials were unimpressed by his justifications. Academic fraud was a serious violation that typically resulted in immediate expulsion and criminal charges. The fact that he'd stolen the work from his own sister while orchestrating her expulsion from Stanford made the situation even more reprehensible. Colorado State University expelled Tyler within days of completing their investigation. His academic transcript was permanently marked with notations about academic dishonesty, making transfer to any other institution virtually impossible. The Computer Science Honor Society revoked his membership, and his academic achievements were retroactively invalidated. But Tyler's problems extended far beyond academic consequences. His gambling addiction had escalated dramatically during his time at college, fueled by easy access to online betting platforms and the overconfidence that came from his stolen academic success. He'd convinced himself that his intelligence advantages would extend to poker and sports betting. His debts to underground gambling operations totaled over $150,000, an astronomical sum that exceeded his parents' annual income from the hardware store. The creditors were not patient academic administrators or understanding family members. They were dangerous criminals who expected prompt payment regardless of Tyler's personal circumstances. When Tyler couldn't meet his payment deadlines, the collectors began making threats that extended beyond financial consequences. They visited our parents' store during business hours, asking pointed questions about property values and family assets. They made it clear that Tyler's debts had become his family's responsibility, whether they'd agreed to that arrangement or not. Meanwhile, my parents were discovering evidence of additional financial crimes Tyler had committed using their business accounts. He'd forged their signatures on loan applications, used the store's credit lines to cover gambling debts, and embezzled money from daily cash receipts over a period of months. The hardware store's bookkeeping revealed systematic theft totaling nearly $50,000 that Tyler had stolen from his own family's livelihood. He'd manipulated inventory records, created fake vendor payments, and redirected customer deposits into personal accounts that funded his gambling addiction. My father, Robert, suffered his first heart episode when the full scope of Tyler's betrayal became clear. The stress of discovering that his favored son had been systematically destroying the family business while accumulating massive criminal debts triggered cardiac problems that required immediate medical attention. The medical bills from Robert's hospitalization added another layer of financial crisis to an already impossible situation. Their health insurance covered basic care but not the specialized cardiac procedures he needed for long-term survival. The family faced medical bankruptcy even without Tyler's gambling debts and theft. As their financial crisis deepened, my parents finally understood the consequences of their choice to support Tyler over me. Their golden child had systematically betrayed their trust, stolen their savings, and exposed them to dangerous criminals who didn't care about family dynamics or parental favoritism. But the ultimate irony was still approaching. The cyber criminal network I discovered was preparing to target Hardy Family Hardware as part of their systematic exploitation of vulnerable small businesses. My parents were about to lose everything they'd worked decades to build, destroyed by the son they'd chosen over the daughter who could have protected them. Tyler's response to his complete downfall was characteristically selfish and cowardly. Rather than face the consequences of his actions, he liquidated what remained of his personal assets and disappeared without warning, leaving his parents to deal with angry creditors, criminal investigators, and the collapse of their family business. His abandonment was the final betrayal in a series of catastrophic decisions that had destroyed everything my parents valued. They'd sacrificed their successful daughter to support their failing son, only to discover that he felt no loyalty or gratitude toward the family that had enabled his destructive behavior. The letters begging me to return home would begin arriving soon, but my parents had no idea they were asking for help from someone who now controlled the resources to save or destroy them completely. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to my Manhattan penthouse by certified mail that required my personal signature. The return address made my hands tremble. Hardy Family, Denver, Colorado. I hadn't heard from my parents in over 2 years. Not since their final cruel dismissal, when I'd tried to explain the truth about Tyler's betrayal. My doorman handed me the thick envelope with professional courtesy, unaware that he was delivering a piece of my painful past into my carefully constructed new life. I set it on my marble kitchen counter and stared at it for hours, afraid to open what I knew would be another attempt to manipulate my emotions for their benefit. The letter was written in my mother's careful handwriting on stationery that looked expensive despite their obvious financial problems. Her words were rambling and desperate, filled with justifications and half-hearted apologies that revealed how little she understood about the magnitude of their betrayal. Dearest Corina, it began using an endearment she'd never employed during my childhood. I hope this letter finds you well and happy wherever life has taken you. We've been thinking about you constantly and regretting the misunderstandings that drove us apart. Misunderstandings, as if framing me for academic dishonesty and destroying my Stanford scholarship was a simple miscommunication, rather than deliberate sabotage designed to elevate Tyler at my expense. The letter continued with vague references to difficult times and family challenges, without explicitly acknowledging Tyler's crimes or their role in enabling his destructive behavior. They claimed to have learned from their mistakes and wanted to rebuild our relationship as a family. But the real purpose emerged in the final paragraphs. They needed my help to save the family hardware store from foreclosure and bankruptcy. Tyler had made some poor financial decisions that threatened everything they'd worked decades to build. They were asking me to come home and use my education to solve problems they couldn't handle themselves. We know we don't deserve your forgiveness, my mother wrote, but Tyler needed our support more than you did at the time. You were always so strong and capable. We believed you would succeed wherever you went, while Tyler required more guidance and assistance. The casual dismissal of my pain was breathtaking. They still believed their favoritism was justified because I was strong and capable enough to survive their betrayal. My success, despite their sabotage, somehow validated their decision to destroy my dreams for Tyler's supposed benefit. I threw the letter in my fireplace and watched it burn, feeling nothing but contempt for their transparent manipulation. They'd chosen Tyler over me when they thought he was valuable, and now they wanted me back because he'd proven worthless. I owed them nothing. But more letters followed over the coming weeks, each more desperate than the previous one. My mother's handwriting became increasingly shaky as she described mounting debts and threats from Tyler's creditors. She mentioned my father's heart problems and the medical bills they couldn't afford, using his health crisis as emotional leverage. Your father asks about you every day, she wrote in the third letter. He wonders if we'll ever see our daughter again before it's too late. He's proud of whatever success you found, and he wants to apologize for the things we said when you tried to tell us about Tyler. Too little, too late. My father had chosen to believe Tyler's lies over my desperate pleas for justice. He'd watched silently as my dreams crumbled, offering no support or understanding when I needed him most. His pride in my success was meaningless when he'd actively worked to prevent it. The letters revealed additional details about Tyler's complete betrayal of their trust. He'd stolen money from the business-forged documents, accumulated massive gambling debts, and finally disappeared when his crimes were discovered. The golden child they'd protected and enabled had destroyed everything they valued. My mother's fifth letter included copies of medical bills from my father's cardiac treatment. The numbers were staggering, easily exceeding $100,000 for procedures their insurance wouldn't cover. She was using his potentially fatal condition to guilt me into returning home and accepting responsibility for problems I hadn't created. "We can't afford the surgery he needs," she wrote desperately. "The doctors say without proper treatment he might not survive another year. I know we don't have the right to ask anything of you, but you're our only hope now that Tyler is gone." The manipulation was obvious but effective. Despite everything they'd done to me, I couldn't completely ignore the possibility of my father dying from preventable medical conditions. He'd been wrong to choose Tyler over me, but death seemed like excessive punishment for parental favoritism. I hired a private investigator to verify the claims in my mother's letters. The report confirmed that Hardy Family Hardware was indeed facing bankruptcy with foreclosure proceedings scheduled within 60 days. Tyler had accumulated gambling debts exceeding $200,000 before disappearing entirely. My father's medical condition was serious and potentially fatal without expensive treatment. But the investigation revealed something my mother's letters hadn't mentioned. The bank handling their foreclosure was Pinnacle Financial Services, a regional institution that I'd acquired 6 months earlier as part of my expanding business portfolio. My parents were begging for mercy from creditors I secretly controlled. The irony was perfect and devastating. Through my anonymous business acquisitions, I now owned the bank that was preparing to seize their house and business. I could save them with a single phone call, or I could watch them lose everything they'd worked decades to build. The choice was entirely mine. My mother's final letter arrived with medical documentation proving my father's deteriorating condition. His cardiologist recommended immediate surgery that would cost nearly $300,000, money they obviously didn't possess. Without treatment, the doctor estimated my father had less than 6 months to live. I failed as a mother. My mother admitted in shaky handwriting that revealed her emotional breakdown. I chose the wrong child and destroyed our family in the process. Tyler took everything and left us with nothing but regret. I understand if you never want to see us again, but your father is dying and we have nowhere else to turn. For the first time since receiving their letters, I felt a flicker of genuine emotion beyond contempt and anger. My mother had finally acknowledged the truth about their favoritism and its consequences. She'd admitted that choosing Tyler over me was a mistake that had cost them everything. But acknowledgement wasn't the same as meaningful accountability. They were only apologizing because Tyler had failed them, not because they'd recognized the injustice of their treatment toward me. Their regret was based on outcomes rather than principles. I decided to return to Denver, but not as the broken daughter they'd discarded 3 years earlier. I would come back as the successful woman I'd become, despite their sabotage, with the power to save or destroy them according to my own judgment. They'd asked for help from their daughter, but they'd be dealing with someone far more formidable than the naive girl they'd betrayed. My business empire was now worth over $50 million, with interests spanning cybersecurity, real estate technology acquisitions, and financial services. I controlled companies they'd never heard of and wielded influence they couldn't imagine. The power dynamic had shifted completely in my favor. The revelation that I controlled their creditor bank meant I could orchestrate their salvation or destruction with surgical precision. They taught me harsh lessons about family loyalty and conditional love. Now it was time for me to teach them about consequences and justice. By the time my mother's desperate letters reached me, I was worth over $50 million and controlled a technology empire that employed more than 200 people across 15 states. My penthouse apartment in Manhattan overlooked Central Park with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city that had embraced my talents when my own family rejected them. Ghost Technologies had become the premier cybersecurity consulting firm in North America, with government contracts worth hundreds of millions and corporate clients that included Fortune 500 companies across every major industry. My reputation for solving impossible digital security problems had made the ghost coder a legendary figure in professional circles that never connected my success to Karina Hardy from suburban Denver. The irony of my mother's letters was that she was begging for help from someone whose capabilities exceeded her wildest imagination. The daughter they dismissed as too serious and selfish had built an empire that dwarfed their small-town hardware store by factors they couldn't comprehend. Their perspective remained tragically limited even in their desperation. My daily routine involved managing international cybersecurity projects, advising government agencies on national security threats, and overseeing business acquisitions that expanded my influence across multiple industries. The broken girl who'd lived in her car and worked 3 minimum wage jobs had been transformed into one of the most powerful women in American technology. But success hadn't erased the pain of their betrayal or my hunger for justice. Every achievement felt hollow when shared with no one who'd known me before my transformation. My apartment was filled with awards and recognition from grateful clients and government officials, but empty of personal relationships that predated my current identity. Through my private investigator's research, I'd been monitoring my family's decline with clinical detachment. Tyler's complete betrayal of their trust validated every warning I'd tried to give them 3 years earlier. Their golden child had systematically destroyed everything they'd sacrificed to support him, proving that merit matters more than favoritism. The most satisfying aspect of my investigation was discovering the full scope of my financial leverage over their situation. Pinnacle Financial Services, the bank foreclosing on their property, was just one piece of a larger portfolio I'd assembled through strategic acquisitions and anonymous shell corporations. I also owned Mountain West Properties, the real estate management company that would acquire their house after foreclosure. Rocky Mountain Medical Group held the contracts for my father's cardiac treatment. Denver Business Services managed the bankruptcy proceedings that would liquidate their remaining assets. Every aspect of their crisis flowed through companies I controlled. The power was intoxicating and terrifying. I could manipulate every element of their financial destruction or salvation with phone calls and document signatures. Their future depended entirely on decisions I would make based on my judgment of their worthiness for mercy or punishment. My hometown newspaper had covered the Hardy family's troubles, extensively noting the tragic irony that their disgraced daughter was the only family member with computer science skills advanced enough to potentially solve their cybersecurity vulnerabilities. The reporter obviously had no idea that the expelled Stanford student was now one of America's most successful technology entrepreneurs. Reading those articles in my Manhattan office surrounded by awards and recognition from grateful clients, I felt the cosmic justice of their situation. They destroyed my Stanford education to protect Tyler's fragile ego, only to discover that my worthless abilities were exactly what they needed for survival. But my father's deteriorating health complicated my desire for pure revenge. Robert Hardy was dying from cardiac problems that proper medical treatment could prevent. His death would be permanent and irreversible, unlike their financial losses, which could theoretically be recovered over time. Despite his role in my betrayal, I couldn't entirely ignore the possibility that he was genuinely remorseful about their treatment of me. Death seemed like excessive punishment for parental favoritism, even favoritism that had caused tremendous damage to my life and dreams. My mother's letters revealed that she was working 3 jobs to cover basic living expenses, while my father underwent minimal cardiac treatment that their insurance barely covered. The role reversal was striking. She was now experiencing the grinding poverty and multiple job exhaustion that I'd endured after my expulsion from Stanford. Tyler's disappearance had left them completely isolated and vulnerable. Their golden child had taken everything valuable and abandoned them to face the consequences of his crimes alone. They'd learned the hard way that unconditional support doesn't guarantee loyalty or gratitude from selfish recipients. The newspaper articles mentioned that neighbors and community members were organizing fundraisers to help the Hardy family, but their efforts wouldn't generate enough money to address medical bills exceeding $300,000. Small-town charity couldn't compete with the scope of Tyler's financial devastation. Through my cybersecurity network, I'd learned that Tyler was living under a false identity in Las Vegas, working as a casino dealer while avoiding both his gambling creditors and the criminal charges pending against him in Colorado. He'd completely abandoned his parents to save himself, proving that his loyalty extended only as far as his personal convenience. My parents had sacrificed their successful daughter to support their failing son, believing that Tyler's need for help justified destroying my opportunities. Now they were discovering that Tyler felt no reciprocal obligation to sacrifice anything for their benefit when his own survival was threatened. The situation was a perfect case study in the consequences of moral compromise. They'd betrayed their principles to help Tyler, and he'd responded by betraying them even more completely. Their investment in favoritism had yielded negative returns that threatened their survival. But I wasn't ready to reveal the full extent of my power or make any decisions about their fate. They needed to understand the gravity of their situation and the magnitude of their past mistakes before I determined whether they deserved salvation or justice. My return to Denver would be carefully orchestrated to maximize the educational value of their experience. They'd asked for help from their daughter, but they were about to discover that the broken girl they discarded had been replaced by someone far more formidable and unforgiving. The decision to return to Denver required weeks of careful planning and strategic preparation. This wouldn't be an emotional reunion or impulsive gesture of forgiveness. I was orchestrating a precisely calculated intervention designed to teach my family definitive lessons about consequences, accountability, and the true value of family loyalty. My legal team at Ghost Technologies prepared comprehensive documentation detailing my business empire and its intersection with my family's crisis. The folders contained contracts, ownership papers, financial statements, and legal instruments that would demonstrate the full scope of my power over their situation. They needed to understand exactly who they were dealing with before any negotiations began. I arranged for my personal attorney, Marcus Webb, to accompany me to Denver as both legal counsel and witness to whatever transpired during my confrontation with my parents. Marcus had handled numerous high-stakes business negotiations and understood the importance of maintaining professional detachment during emotionally charged situations. My wardrobe selection was deliberate and symbolic. A tailored charcoal business suit from an exclusive Manhattan designer that cost more than my parents' monthly income. Italian leather shoes that Tyler would have coveted during his materialistic college years. A platinum watch that represented success earned through merit rather than manipulation. The transportation arrangements were equally calculated for maximum psychological impact. A Tesla Model S Plaid in midnight black, representing technological innovation and environmental consciousness. The vehicle would demonstrate my success while highlighting my values that differed sharply from Tyler's superficial materialism and destructive selfishness. My investigation had revealed that Tyler had indeed returned to Denver, contrary to my mother's letters suggesting he'd disappeared permanently. He was staying in my parents' house, supposedly helping them navigate their financial crisis while actually hiding from Las Vegas creditors and Colorado law enforcement agencies pursuing criminal charges. The private investigator confirmed that Tyler was still lying to our parents about his circumstances, claiming he'd been forced to leave college due to false accusations and promising to find employment that would help solve their financial problems. His capacity for deception remained impressive even when his previous lies had caused catastrophic damage. My parents were working exhausting schedules to generate minimal income that barely covered basic survival expenses. My mother was cleaning office buildings at night, stocking grocery store shelves during early morning shifts, and caring for my father during afternoon hours. Robert was doing light bookkeeping for small businesses when his cardiac condition allowed minimal physical activity. Their desperation was complete and genuine. Without dramatic intervention, they would lose their house within 30 days, the hardware store would be liquidated to pay Tyler's debts, and my father would likely die from preventable cardiac problems. They were experiencing exactly the type of powerless despair I'd endured after my Stanford expulsion. But I'd learned crucial differences between victim status and survivor mentality during my transformation from broken college student to technology mogul. They were still expecting rescue from external sources rather than taking responsibility for the choices that had created their crisis. My intervention would force them to confront uncomfortable truths about accountability and consequences. The timing of my return was strategically chosen for maximum impact. I would arrive during the afternoon when both parents would be home, but early enough to have extended conversation before evening fatigue compromised anyone's mental clarity. Tyler would be present to witness their reaction to my transformation and success. My mother's medical reports about my father's cardiac condition were accurate but incomplete. Robert Hardy was indeed facing potentially fatal heart problems, but the timeline was less urgent than her letter suggested. He could survive several more months with minimal treatment, providing sufficient time for meaningful accountability discussions before any medical interventions. The revelation of my control over their creditor institutions would be the centerpiece of my confrontation strategy. They needed to understand that their daughter now possessed the power to save or destroy them, completely reversing the dynamic from 3 years earlier when they'd controlled my educational and financial future. My business empire's anonymous structure meant they'd been begging for mercy from companies I owned without realizing the connection. The cosmic irony of their situation would become clear when I revealed that every aspect of their crisis flowed through my corporate network. But my ultimate goal wasn't revenge or punishment for its own sake. I wanted them to understand the full scope of their betrayal and its consequences, accept genuine accountability for their choices, and demonstrate meaningful commitment to justice and family values they'd previously abandoned for Tyler's convenience. The terms of any potential assistance would be non-negotiable and designed to ensure lasting behavioral change rather than temporary relief. Tyler would face criminal prosecution for his crimes, my parents would undergo counseling to address their favoritism issues, and my Stanford reputation would be officially cleared through their cooperation with university administrators. If they refused my conditions or attempted to negotiate compromises, I would walk away permanently and allow their natural consequences to proceed without interference. They would have one opportunity to demonstrate that they learned meaningful lessons from their catastrophic mistakes. My return to Denver represented more than family reconciliation or business negotiation. It was a final test of whether the people who'd raised me possessed any capacity for growth, accountability, and genuine remorse. Their response would determine whether our relationship had any foundation worth rebuilding. The girl they'd betrayed was gone forever, replaced by a woman who controlled resources and wielded influence they couldn't imagine. They'd asked for help from their daughter, but they would be dealing with someone who'd learned harsh lessons about power, justice, and conditional love. I arrived at my childhood home in suburban Denver on a crisp October afternoon, when golden leaves covered the front yard where Tyler and I had played as children. The house looked smaller and shabbier than my memories suggested, with peeling paint and a sagging front porch that revealed years of deferred maintenance my parents could no longer afford. My Tesla pulled into the same driveway where Tyler's BMW had once represented everything I'd envied about my family's favoritism. That luxury vehicle was long gone sold to cover his gambling debts, replaced by my father's aging pickup truck that barely passed state emissions inspections. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Marcus Webb sat in the passenger seat, reviewing legal documents one final time before we approached the front door. His presence provided professional credibility and psychological support for what I knew would be an emotionally challenging confrontation with people who'd systematically destroyed my dreams. I knocked on the front door using the brass knocker my father had installed when I was 12 years old. The sound echoed through the house with hollow finality, announcing the return of a daughter they'd discarded and probably never expected to see again. My hands remained steady despite the magnitude of this moment. My mother opened the door wearing a faded house dress that had seen better decades and an expression of shock that quickly transformed into desperate hope. She'd aged dramatically since I'd last seen her, with gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of constant worry and exhaustion. "Karina," she whispered, as if afraid I might disappear if she spoke too loudly. "Is it really you?" "Hello, Mother," I replied with professional courtesy that maintained emotional distance. "I received your letters. This is Marcus Webb, my attorney. We need to discuss your situation." The word attorney caused visible panic to flash across her face. She was probably wondering whether I'd come home to demand legal accountability for their role in my Stanford expulsion or Tyler's financial crimes that had destroyed their family business. My father emerged from the living room using a walker that supported his weakened cardiac condition. Robert Hardy had always been a strong man who prided himself on physical capability and independence. Seeing him frail and dependent was jarring, even considering everything he'd done to me. "Karina," he said simply, his voice heavy with emotion I couldn't interpret. "You look successful." I finished for him, noting his obvious shock at my designer clothing and confident bearing. That's what happens when people develop their talents instead of having them destroyed by family members. Tyler appeared in the hallway behind them, and I was struck by how much he'd deteriorated since his college glory days. His face showed the telltale signs of chronic stress and poor nutrition. His clothes were wrinkled and ill-fitting, suggesting someone who'd given up caring about personal appearance. "Well, well," Tyler sneered with characteristic arrogance, despite his obviously diminished circumstances. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence. Come back to gloat about how successful you are while your family loses everything." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I came back because you begged me to." I looked directly at my mother, multiple desperate letters about family emergencies and moral obligations. "Did you forget writing those?" My mother's face flushed with embarrassment as Tyler realized she'd been reaching out to me against his wishes. He'd probably forbidden them from contacting me, preferring to maintain the fiction that their problems could be solved without acknowledging their need for the daughter they'd betrayed. "I think we should sit down," I suggested, gesturing toward the living room where we'd held so many family meetings during my childhood. "We have important business to discuss, and you're going to want to be sitting when you hear what I have to tell you." The living room looked exactly as I remembered it, with the same furniture and family photos that had documented happier times before Tyler's destructive selfishness had poisoned our relationships. But now the space felt smaller and sadder, burdened by the weight of broken dreams and financial desperation. Marcus positioned himself strategically where he could observe everyone's reactions while maintaining access to the legal documents that would soon transform this family meeting into something resembling a corporate negotiation. "I assume you want to discuss financial assistance." I began crossing my legs and adopting the confident posture I'd perfected during high-stakes business meetings. "Mother's letters were quite explicit about your need for money to save the house and pay medical bills." "We don't want charity," my father said with what remained of his stubborn pride. "We just hoped maybe you could help us understand our options. Your computer knowledge might show us something we're missing." Tyler snorted with derision. Right, like Karina's community college level skills are going to solve problems that actual experts haven't been able to fix. She's probably working some dead end tech support job and pretending to be successful. I smiled at his ignorance, savoring the moment before revelation would destroy his comfortable assumptions about my circumstances. You're partially correct, Tyler. I am working in technology, but perhaps not quite the way you imagine. I nodded to Marcus, who handed me the first folder of documents. Let me tell you about my actual situation, and then we can discuss what assistance I might be willing to provide. The time had come to reveal the full scope of my transformation and the power I now wielded over their fate. They were about to discover that their broken daughter had become someone far more formidable than their wildest imagination could conceive. 3 years ago, you destroyed my Stanford scholarship and expelled me from my own family to protect Tyler's fragile ego. I began, my voice steady and professional, despite the emotional weight of finally confronting them with the truth. You believed I was strong enough to survive your betrayal, while Tyler needed your unconditional support. Let me show you how that decision worked out. I opened the first document folder and spread Ghost Technologies' corporate papers across their coffee table. Annual revenue reports, government contract summaries, and business acquisition records that demonstrated the scope of the empire I'd built from the ashes of their sabotage. Ghost Technologies is currently worth $52 million. I announced, watching their faces transform from confusion to shock to disbelief. I employ 237 people across 15 states. Our client list includes Fortune 500 companies and federal agencies responsible for national security. My mother's hands flew to her mouth in stunned amazement. My father's eyes widened as he struggled to comprehend numbers that exceeded his small business experience by orders of magnitude. Tyler's smug expression evaporated as reality penetrated his defensive arrogance. "Impossible," Tyler sputtered. "You were expelled for plagiarism. No legitimate company would hire someone with your academic record." "You're absolutely right," I agreed with cold satisfaction, which is why I created my own companies and built my reputation on results rather than credentials. The business world doesn't care about Stanford's opinion when you can solve problems that stump everyone else. Marcus handed me the second folder containing documentation of my family's financial crisis and my control over their creditor institutions. This revelation would be the most devastating psychological blow, proving that their fate depended entirely on my mercy. Parts. Pinnacle Financial Services, the bank foreclosing on your house and business, is one of my subsidiaries. I continued spreading ownership papers across the table. Mountain West Properties, which will acquire your assets after bankruptcy, reports directly to me. Rocky Mountain Medical Group, handling father's cardiac treatment, operates under my corporate umbrella. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language, unable to process that their daughter now controlled every aspect of their financial destruction or salvation. "You've been begging for mercy from companies I own," I explained with clinical detachment. "Every foreclosure notice, every medical bill, every bankruptcy proceeding flows through my business network. Your crisis exists entirely within my sphere of influence." Tyler's face had turned pale as the implications became clear. He was facing criminal charges for fraud and theft, with debts to dangerous people who didn't care about his family's financial problems. His parents' destruction meant losing his last refuge from consequences he'd spent months avoiding. "What do you want?" my mother whispered, finally understanding that I held absolute power over their survival. I leaned back in my chair and considered them with the same cold calculation I applied to business negotiations. These people had systematically destroyed my dreams to protect someone who'd betrayed them completely. They deserved to understand exactly what they'd lost through their favoritism. "I want justice," I replied simply. "Not revenge, but actual accountability for the choices you made and the damage you caused. You taught me harsh lessons about conditional love and family loyalty. Now it's time for your education." I pulled out a prepared contract that outlined the terms of any assistance I might provide. The conditions were non-negotiable and designed to ensure lasting behavioral change rather than temporary relief from consequences they'd created through their own actions. Tyler will surrender to Colorado authorities within 48 hours to face criminal charges for fraud, theft, and identity crimes. He'll plead guilty to all charges and serve whatever sentence the court determines. No plea bargains, no reduced charges, no family interference with justice. Tyler exploded from his chair in rage and panic. "You can't be serious. I'm your brother. Family doesn't destroy family." "You destroyed me first," I reminded him calmly. "You stole my work, framed me for plagiarism, and convinced our parents to choose your failure over my success. Now you'll face the natural consequences of your criminal behavior without family protection." My parents looked stricken as they realized I was demanding they sacrifice their golden child just as they'd once sacrificed me. The role reversal was perfect and deeply symbolic of the justice I'd waited 3 years to achieve. Its second condition. I continued ignoring Tyler's protests. Both parents will attend weekly therapy sessions with a licensed counselor to address your favoritism patterns and learn appropriate family dynamics. This isn't optional or temporary. You'll continue counseling for a minimum of 2 years. Vote. Third, you'll cooperate fully with Stanford University officials to clear my academic record. Written statements acknowledging Tyler's fraud, apologies for your role in my false accusation, and testimony supporting my reinstatement if the university chooses to pursue it. My mother was crying quietly, finally understanding the full scope of damage their choices had inflicted on my life and dreams. My father sat silently, his cardiac condition forgotten, as he grappled with the magnitude of their moral failure. "If you accept these conditions," I concluded, "I'll pay for all medical treatment. Father requires prevent foreclosure on your house and business, and provide financial support during your recovery period. If you refuse, I'll walk out that door and never contact you again. You'll face the natural consequences of your choices without any assistance from the daughter you discarded." The room fell silent, except for Tyler's heavy breathing as he realized his parents were seriously considering terms that would send him to prison. His comfortable assumption that family loyalty would protect him from accountability was crumbling before his eyes. "How long do we have to decide?" my father asked quietly. "Until tomorrow morning," I replied, standing to leave. "I'm staying at the Brown Palace Hotel downtown. Call me before 10 a.m. with your answer. After that, the offer expires permanently." Tyler broke down, completely confessing everything in a desperate attempt to negotiate better terms. He admitted to stealing my work, orchestrating my expulsion, gambling away their savings, embezzling from the business, and lying about every aspect of his life for years. But his confession only reinforced my determination to see justice served. My family had chosen him over me when they believed he was valuable, and now they had to choose between enabling his continued criminality or accepting accountability for their catastrophic mistakes. I left them with the contract and walked out of my childhood home for what might be the final time, knowing that their response would determine whether our family had any future worth preserving. 6 months after delivering my ultimatum, I stood in the same living room where I'd confronted my family with the consequences of their betrayal. But everything had changed in ways that exceeded even my expectations for justice and redemption. Tyler was serving a 5-year sentence at Sterling Correctional Facility, where he worked in the prison library, and was finally learning the value of honest labor. The criminal investigation had revealed additional crimes I hadn't known about, including credit card fraud and tax evasion, that lengthened his punishment beyond what any of us had anticipated. His weekly letters to our parents showed genuine remorse and self-reflection that had been impossible when family enablement protected him from consequences. Prison had forced him to confront the damage his selfishness had inflicted on everyone who'd tried to help him, including the sister he'd systematically destroyed to protect his own fragile ego. My father's health had improved dramatically with proper cardiac treatment that my medical insurance covered completely. Robert Hardy would live to see his grandchildren if any of his children ever forgave him enough to maintain family relationships that included future generations. His weekly therapy sessions were teaching him to recognize favoritism patterns that had nearly destroyed our family. My mother had thrown herself into counseling with the dedication she'd once reserved for enabling Tyler's destructive behavior. Janet Hardy was learning to understand how parental favoritism creates competition between siblings instead of mutual support, and how conditional love damages everyone it touches. Stanford University had officially cleared my academic record and offered me an honorary doctorate in recognition of my contributions to cybersecurity and technology innovation. The ceremony was scheduled for next month, with Professor Williams personally presenting the degree he'd been prevented from awarding 3 years earlier. Most importantly, my parents had begun to understand the difference between supporting struggling children and enabling destructive behavior that hurts everyone involved. Their therapy sessions were teaching them healthy family dynamics based on accountability rather than favoritism. The hardware store was operating successfully under new management I'd hired, employing loyal workers who served the community better than my family ever had. The business generated enough profit to support my parents while contributing positively to their neighborhood rather than merely surviving through daily stress and financial desperation. During our monthly family dinners, we were slowly rebuilding relationships based on mutual respect rather than the toxic dynamics that had poisoned my childhood. My parents were learning to value all their children's achievements instead of comparing us constantly or choosing favorites based on who needed the most help. I'd established the Hardy Foundation Scholarship Fund for students facing academic injustice, ensuring that other young people wouldn't suffer the educational destruction that had nearly ended my dreams. The program provided legal support, financial assistance, and alternative educational pathways for students wrongly accused of academic dishonesty. My technology empire continued growing, but success felt more meaningful when shared with family members who genuinely celebrated my achievements rather than resenting them or taking credit for opportunities I'd created independently. Money and power were tools for positive impact rather than merely symbols of personal vindication. Tyler's prison transformation gave me hope that people could change when forced to confront the consequences of their actions without family protection from accountability. His letters showed understanding about the damage favoritism had inflicted on our entire family and genuine appreciation for the educational opportunities he'd squandered through selfish choices. But the most profound lesson I'd learned was that success isn't about revenge against people who wronged you. True victory comes from rising above those who tried to limit your potential and using your power to create positive change that benefits others facing similar challenges. My family had taught me that blood relationships don't guarantee loyalty support or unconditional love. But they'd also shown me that people can learn from catastrophic mistakes and grow into better versions of themselves when given appropriate consequences and genuine opportunities for redemption. I discovered that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting past injuries or pretending they didn't happen. It means choosing to build something positive from the ashes of betrayal rather than remaining trapped by anger that serves no constructive purpose. The girl who'd been expelled from Stanford and disowned by her family was gone forever, replaced by a woman who understood that true strength comes from surviving injustice without becoming unjust yourself. My family's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also forced me to develop capabilities I might never have discovered otherwise. Standing in that living room where we'd once planned my destruction, I felt genuine peace for the first time since receiving my Stanford acceptance letter. Justice had been served, accountability had been accepted, and our family was slowly learning to function based on love rather than favoritism. The hardware store would remain in our family, operated ethically and successfully under professional management that valued integrity over profit. My father would live to see his mistakes corrected and his family healed from damage that had once seemed irreparable. Tyler would serve his sentence and hopefully emerge as someone capable of honest relationships and productive contributions to society. Prison was harsh medicine, but it was teaching him lessons that family enablement had prevented him from learning through gentler methods. My parents would continue their therapy and gradually become the kind of people who supported all their children's dreams instead of sacrificing one child's success for another child's convenience. They were learning that love means wanting the best for everyone, not just the family member who demands the most attention. As for me, I'd learned that happiness comes from using your talents to solve problems and help others, regardless of whether anyone acknowledges your contributions or appreciates your efforts. Success is its own reward when built on merit, rather than manipulation or family connections. Have you ever faced a situation where family members chose favoritism over fairness? And how did you handle the betrayal? I'd love to hear your thoughts on standing up for yourself when the people closest to you don't support your dreams. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more content about overcoming family challenges. Share it with anyone who needs encouragement to pursue their goals, despite opposition, and comment below with your own experiences of building success after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to never give up on your dreams, regardless of who tries to stop you. Remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, and sometimes the greatest success comes from proving wrong the people who doubted you most.